experience in the industry and holds relationships with the key media players. Since moving to the US, Rob has been named as an advertising age media maven and has keynoted events such as Adtech New York and the IAB annual conference. He's a director of WPP Digital, Wild Tangent, 4A's, the Ad Council, and a member of the Greycroft Advisory Board. Please welcome me. Please join me in welcoming Rob Norman. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You need to share their story with Sheryl Sandberg. She seems to think that social media starting revolutions in North Africa is sufficient verification of its power. Finding bears tops that by a distance. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me. It's a joy to be in Sydney, and it's a particular joy to have my cousin Lindy, who I've never met before, in the audience today. Hi, Lindy. Thank you for coming. I get to meet her parents, her siblings, husbands, and everything else later on today, so wish me luck with that. So if you think this is scary, it's got nothing on that one, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to tell you so many things that you already know. I hope I have some slightly different perspective on it than you've heard so far. I am very keen when we get to the end of this, assuming we ever do. Someone relatively recently, when I gave a talk in New York, said, "There's only one difference, Rob, between you and Bernie Madoff, and the difference is that one day, in theory at least, Bernie Madoff will finish his sentence, and you have yet to do so." So I do go on a bit, so please, organisers, flag at the appropriate moment, because I'd like to take some questions, and obviously some generous and kind tweets are always welcome. So let's get into it. I think there you go, straight away, first click problem. So technology, as demonstrated by the image to your left, has very rarely, apart from in the world of the geek, been something that's been loved and almost never adored. Yet suddenly, largely due to the activities of an enterprise in One Infinite Loop, Cupertino, California, and I don't know the zip code, technology has become something that people actually love. And the impact of the smartphone, particularly the iPhone, and the impact of the tablet, and in particular the iPad, has changed everything. And you never used to hear stories about people's 80-year-old parents and their 18-month-old grandchildren getting their own version of utility out of technology than you do now. So if that's the case, which represents really profound change, then we have to think about what that means, because it's created a behavioural and psychological shift. It's changed adoption of technology and the behaviour with it. Someone suggested to me in New York last week, by the way, you look really funny when you use an iPad as a camera. Don't you think that's kind of funny? You hold this big sort of thing in front of you. Sorry, didn't mean to pick you out there, but you know. Yeah. Amazing how they've not caught on with the paparazzi. Actually, I was just hiding behind it. I wasn't taking a photograph at all. But someone suggested to me recently that the obvious thing to do is there should just be a paycheck deduction for all Americans of $750 a year, split into 26 equal 2-week pay periods, and the payroll reduction should total $750. It should be in favour of Apple Inc., and on that basis, Apple will just simply send you the new one of the whatever it is every year without you having to bother to pay someone $500 to stand in line for you for 4 days, when in fact what they're really doing is they're standing in line for 4 days so they can ship the new iPad, not the iPad 3, actually up to North Asia, where they will sell at retail plus $500 plus another $500, which is actually what's going on in that market. It's disturbing. This is a lot of charts here. We're on number 2. So the most important thing from my point of view, because my job by and large is to help advertisers, and what we do, because we're a media services business, some people call us a media buying agency. I think we do a little bit more than that. But our job, at its heart, is to help advertisers allocate the dollars they spend by brand, by geography, by channel, and within channel, to optimize that spend once it's allocated, and to attribute the effectiveness of that spend. And so when we think about that, we have to think about it in the context of this new world. Because we all understand what passive media consumption is, and it's really easy when you come to something like Adtech to assume that there is no passive media consumption anymore. If you look at the profit and loss accounts of some of the major broadcasters around the world, you might conclude that was not in fact true. And when we did the math about a year ago and reduced in the United States all video consumption to single minutes of consumption, we determined that as recently as 12 months ago, still 98% of all video that was being consumed on television. Now it's clear that number's changing, and it's probably plunged to 96.5 by now. And obviously it's changed for younger demographics more than older demographics. But if you're an advertiser, it pays not to underestimate the continuing power of television. And if you go to most major brands on the 1st of October, and you say, I can give you 25% more budget than you thought you had, and here's a stretched sales goal against that budget, what are you going to do with it? Almost all of them, if not actually all of them, will say, we'll spend it on TV. But the fact is, media's become active as well. It's become participatory, and you can tell by all of the tweets here. And we also know that the activity of sharing and curating media created by others is becoming a kind of sport, almost. And being a kind of curatorial and creating person in this world is almost like being good at sports was in the old days. That's kind of psychologically how it feels. If you're more retweeted or more repenned or more people comment on your Facebook status, then it has a social status that really only things like sports and being exceptionally funny had before. And the rise of Pinterest, and I was actually going to title this presentation, Pinterest, Nothing Else Matters, but thought you may have seen through that. The rise of Pinterest and the extraordinary numbers we're seeing there is a real truth of that. Creation, however, remains a relatively niche activity. Not a status update, not a repin, not a tweet or a real tweet, but the real creation of content, of people actually creating something truly original. There's a lot of it, but it remains a relatively niche behavior. So I just wanted to give you some perspective there. So the question we ask ourselves, which we ask ourselves in order to start moving towards some answers, is this: what is actually underwriting the evolution? And clearly it started with broadband, and before that with the internet itself. But it's the social, mobile, search and data infrastructure that enables consumers to connect, both to devices, for the devices to connect to other devices, and for the consumers to connect to each other. If you live in a world of connected consumers, you have to live in a world of connected communications. We need to create content for every platform. We need to distribute it across every platform, and we've been doing that for a while, but the biggest challenge is how do we connect it across those platforms, and how we drive a new balance between the two words that I find myself talking about most, apart from the love of my cousin's first cousin, who you may have guessed by now would be my girlfriend, and the whole idea of the delivery and discovery of content. Look, I'm going to pause just to say what I mean by that. I've always felt that advertising, the things we push, has two fundamental roles. One is the delivery of messaging to create relevance in the minds of audiences, to help people understand what a product or a brand does, to help them understand that it's relevant to them and perform some relevant function in their lives. And we have to do that. And if you want to do it at scale, you have to do it in mass media. And as Jeremy Bullmore, the doyen of our business and the long-time creative director and later chairman of JWT said, To put it simply, if you want to be as famous as Madonna, everyone needs to know who you are. And to a degree at least, that remains true. The other function advertising has beyond delivery of that social relevance is directing people into, that wasn't meant to happen. I didn't touch it. Maybe they're moving me on. It's kind of getting gonged off early. The other thing it does is it directs consumers into brand experiences. And people have created brand experiences for a long time. They've called them dealer showrooms. They've called them stores. More recently, they called them websites. Even more recently, they called them Facebook brand pages. Even more recently than that, they called them Facebook timelines. And even more recently than that, they called them Pinterest boards. And the goal of brand experiences is to get people to have a deeper and richer sense of that relevance. But we know that the conversion from that mass audience into the people who will engage in that experience will be relatively low. And the purpose overall of this is to tell people that you still need to buy reach. Whatever you say, you still need to buy reach. And you still have to accept that the conversion from reach to engagement is relatively low, which means that when you get to the engagement phase, closing out the deal to turn that person into a customer, a loyalist, and crucially, an advocate is vital. If those brand experiences are really successful, or worse still, really unsuccessful, because as you all know, that good news travels fast, but nowhere near as fast as bad news, what those people do is share that experience and their experience of that experience into the social stream characterized by Facebook, Twitter, and all the usual suspects, which allows a whole nother layer of people to discover brand communication, and discovery alongside delivery is the goal we're aiming for today. We've already moved from the social web, which really became established and got traction 4 years ago, up to about 2 years ago, into a new phase where social is a feature of all communications. Clearly, the whole web is social. Clearly, the chart is not building as I was intending it to do, but it is now. And social is increasingly becoming the anchor of the web. This is available on a PDF to the people that are here. And what our sense of it is now is that Mark Zuckerberg's message of social by design is making its way through the whole of the web and all of marketing communications. And we'll touch on that a bit more later. So, just so you know, just to calibrate the time, that was the introduction. Sort of important, I should mention that, just in case you thought that was the detail. So that was the introduction. I really wanted to talk about 4 things today. Really about how the new world meets the old world, how the digital world meets the physical world, about the data bridges we can and need to build, and my secret love affair with Martha Stewart, which I'll go into in excruciating detail later. So, the centerpiece of the new world is this, that as technology has become untethered from keyboards attached to screens, mice attached to ports in computers, we are seeing the end of the digital distinction and a change in consumers' expectation of media. There was an interesting physical and psychological act that said, I'm going to do something on the computer now because that's where my digital experience takes place. But today, people's digital experiences are fully untethered. And of course, it's mobility, the great empowerment. Mobile sets me free. It now means I can read my email whilst I'm on the exercise cycle. It means I can take my media sliced and diced through Pulse or direct from the New York Times anywhere I want to. And it means I can take my social network and all of the people and the things I care about around me in my pocket. And so when people talk about what is the year of mobile, I think It was at least last year or the year before, but it's becoming vital to the world that we live in. But what's kind of more interesting to me, because I still think about reach quite a lot, because I think it's important, is that mobile is also really empowering the future of print and out of home. And I think there are many print publishers that have captured particularly the tablet device and used this wonderful difference of this browserless, keyboardless environment. By the way, if you buy a copy of Vogue, which for the younger people in the room is a magazine which has paper and pages, the October issue is rather big and there's a good movie about it. If you buy a copy of Vogue, there's no browser, there's no keyboard, there's nothing apart from your eyes and your hands that sits between you and the content. The great thing is, the same is true of the tablet. Which is why, for many advertisers who are embracing the tablet revolution, some of the ways they're finding easiest to do is to ride on the back of published content and create really, really rich and deep connected communications that take people from an experience they're used to, being adjacent to, part of, and the reflected glow of content, being able to connect that experience right down into their commerce or brand experience applications. The problem, of course, that they're all bumping into, and who here has tried to use an e-commerce site with a pull-down menu on their iPad? I think there's probably quite a lot of you, but as you probably know, pull-down menus and iPads don't go very well together because the keyboard's always popping up when you don't want it to pop up. And we've now got a whole raft of clients who are sitting there saying, this is kind of really interesting. It's almost like I had a single floor department store and suddenly there's an opportunity to put elevators in and escalators in, and are now in the process of completely redesigning their commerce applications for HTML5, specifically for the tablet environment, but also because they perceive the whole notion of touch as a form of navigation alongside voice is going to supersede point and click in the way that people want to interact in the future. And it's quite possible in 10 to 15 years' time that people will find the idea of keyboard point and click really rather a quaint historical artifact in the way that people interacted digitally. But what it's also doing is it's fueling out of home, one of the few media that's left that doesn't actually interrupt you, but it's very hard to skip through. It's really there and it's in the environment. And connecting out of home through QR, through NFC and any other number of future technologies should be a huge boost to that industry. So all of you that are sitting there thinking about what role some of these traditional media play for your brands and in your media plans, the answer is, if they're not digitally enabled, the likelihood is they're not going to play a big role in the future. If they are digitally enabled, they could become more powerful than they ever were before. So of course what this is doing, and the whole rise of technology, is disrupting traditional media players across the board. It's pretty hard now to work out what radio is in a pure sense. Does that mean just listening to audio? Is that radio? Does it mean listening to scheduled audio? Does it mean listening to packaged audio, whether it's playlists or programs? I'm not sure what the definition is. But most of you, I think, will be familiar with the famous Mary Meeker chart that she publishes every year, that is the one that's most often used by the digital selling community, that says, this is the percentage of time that people spend online, this is the percentage of advertiser money that is spent online. If you really wanted to bitch and moan about that particular chart, if you're a media owner, then you'd be in the radio industry. Because the radio industry, according to Mary Meeker's charts at least, although she never seems to mention it in dispatches, is the one that has the highest share of time spent in relation to the amount of ad dollars that are spent. So disruption in radio, disruption in print, disruption in television too. And in television, programming itself is being transformed. More and more content makers are integrating digital applications and particularly the social stream into the making of programming. Some of the obvious ones, the MTV Awards, the Grammys, the Super Bowl, and others, have worked out how to take conversation into the show itself and visualize that conversation as part of the flow of the program. And social media and TV are manifestly fuel for each other's fire. And when you look at that kind of everybody's favorite stat these days, how many friends have you got, which always leads me to a pause to remind people that the internet, the New Yorker is a magazine that's published in New York, and the New Yorker published a cartoon in the late 90s which got fairly widely circulated and has appeared in many keynote decks and others, which is a dog sitting in front of a computer screen and a keyboard, and he turns around and says, "The good news is, on the internet no one knows I'm a dog," which was basically a message about the power or the value of anonymity online. And there's an interesting end cap, because in the fall, or as they say in America, or the autumn as they say in every other country in the world, of last year, the New Yorker published another cartoon, which was a guy standing in front of a pharmacist, and the pharmacist has 2 packs of analgesics, 1 in each hand, and says, "This one has more friends." And I think those are the end caps so far of how people think about the internet. Until 2009, television audiences almost in every category have been in decline around the world. Yet in 2010, 2011 and 2012 consecutively, the MTV Awards, the Grammys and the Super Bowl have had their biggest television audiences in history. And whilst it's to be expected that a digital stream is going to enhance live events and the audiences, I do kind of wonder how many people missed touchdowns because they were tweeting at the time. I also wonder how we managed to enjoy the Super Bowl before there was social media, but somehow, oh well, we had beer. That was the social media that were then. But what's fascinating to me is that it's not just the set-piece live events that are benefiting from the social stream. And when Fox was airing new episodes of Glee in the US, it consistently produced very, very significant Twitter spikes whilst the show was on air. And one of the things that I would encourage all of the people in the room that are trying to recreate value in traditional content and in traditional forms of content distribution, whether you're a broadcaster, a publisher, a producer, or a director, is, like it or not, listen to Mark Zuckerberg. I believe it will become imperative that programming and entertainment is social by design. And I speculate as to what the Twitter sphere would have looked like had last night, for example, the first ever episode of Lost been shown on television, and what would have happened to the social arc through the life of Lost and the serial, and how even it may have influenced the way that J.J. Abrams would have produced the show. One thing I'm fairly sure of is that had he been planning that show after the 1st of February the 29th this year, he would have said, what I need to do is that I need to create a backstory for all of these characters, and he would have built a Facebook timeline that would have gone back through the lives and the social characteristics of all of the people and how they came to be on that plane that crashed, and lit the fire under the show that way. And we're very much looking forward to a big development. And if you're an advertiser and you're thinking about your social media strategy, and you may be thinking that there could be more to life than just building a Facebook timeline, you may be very gratified to know that people that are making large reach programs from which you're desperate to achieve value and desperate to drive engagement, if those people design that content in a way that's social by design, and you can build your brand into the social stream around that program, as well as the program stream around that program, you're going to be happy indeed. And what social is doing, both asynchronously through random Twitter feeds and Facebook posts, but increasingly synchronously with apps that recognize the audio feeds from TV shows, and I'm sure you have seen all of these, is that in a way that maybe we hadn't expected, but have been talking about since the Time Warner Orlando Full Service Network trial in 1993. There's a little aside here. All full-service network trials always used pizza and pizza delivery as the example of, and you'll be able to order a pizza whilst you're watching television. It's interesting that all internet-connected TVs say, and there'll be Pandora and Shazam. So it turns out that Shazam is the Domino's pizza of our time. But we will see TV becoming interactive in a way that we hadn't thought of before. Now, I'm not here to tell you that any one of these particular technologies is going to be the one that does it, but I think many of you agree with me that it's going to happen. So at the same time, the media that we all consume is becoming digitized. So is much of the world that we inhabit. And you touched on the notion of the Internet of Things. And I think it goes even more deeply than that. My sense is that people that own anything, whether it's a brand or a building or a road sign or a parking instruction, are increasingly going to think about what data they need to append to that physical object in order to increase its value to consumers. It would be pretty interesting. How many people here have ever tried to park legally on the streets of Manhattan? Thank you. How did it go? It didn't? Okay. That one of the problems with parking on the streets of Manhattan is that the number of signs within a 5-meter space that tell you things like no parking here for street cleaning between 9:30 and 11:30 on Tuesday, no standing between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. any day, no parking in some places in West Chelsea, which is the nightclub district, between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning, and so it goes on. And there are some places where there are perhaps 5 of these signs with apparently contradictory information, and it requires great skill in the construction of parking instruction Venn diagrams to determine if the hour that you're actually there and planning to park is one that is actually legal to park. So the Internet of Things is going to stretch into many, many different places. Mobility is at the heart of bringing the physical world to life. I'm deliberately not kind of shilling for the clients of Group M, but I can't help giving a shout out to Macy's, which most of you will know is a big department store, and you can actually order online from Macy's and have goods delivered in Australia. And I believe now that if you can purchase relatively low physical weight items and spend enough money, you will actually find it cheaper to shop from Macy's in the US and have it delivered here to you in Sydney than you will shopping locally, which is kind of interesting because I also understand that Sydney's... Is there anyone here who works for either Sydney's 2 main department stores? Someone have to shout if they do, because I can't see the hands. Okay, on which time I believe I'm on safe ground by saying, I believe and I'm told, so I haven't kind of proven this out for myself, but I'm told that neither of them has a full e-commerce application. You can't buy online, although one of them has taken a giant step into the future and allowed you to browse some of their goods on their website, which is, for which we should all be thankful, of course. So, it'd be very interesting, and I will be following Macy's orders from Sydney over the next couple of weeks, but please do go on to Macy's.com and you will find it should, via your IP address, take you straight through to the homepage version, which includes the international shipping features. But what Macy's have done is that they have mobile enabled their entire store. Not all of their stores, they have 534, but many of their largest stores, including the one that many of you will have been to in Herald Square, New York, Macy's customers can now either by using QR or via Shopkick become discovered by Macy's, assuming they've opted in, to actually take people into special offers and real extra benefits of mobility. And it has transformed the way people are using the store. At Home Depot, and you mentioned a piece of technology that I thought was kind of quite cute, the one about looking after plants. The person I was talking to, sitting next to me, said, I wonder if they ever tried sticking their finger in the pot and finding out if it was dry to determine whether they should water it, because that would be digital in a different kind of way. But what Home Depot have done across their gardening range is they've added codes and data to all of the signage that's around plants, and not only about how you care for that particular plant, but in the great spirit of Amazon-developed collaborative filtering, gone further than that. So if you're growing this in the sun and it's creating shade next to it as a result of the size of the bush, the kind of things you might consider are these. So what we're seeing is mobility and the technology. It would have been really hard to do with a PC. I don't know about you, but I didn't see that many people walking into Macy's or Home Depot with a PC and a keyboard and an Ethernet cable in order to try and find out what benefits were in store. So mobile is absolutely crucial. And of course what it's also doing, again, principally in mobile, is socializing the customer experience. And the first of these that really hit the headlines in the US was Best Buy's development of the 12th Force. You can guess what vehicle is used to deliver the 12th Force. The TW is meant to be something of a clue there. And what they did was they trusted their blue shirts to their staff and their expertise in the goods they sold, and said to them, if you're an expert in TV installation, if you're an expert in high-end hi-fi, if you're an expert in gaming consoles and so forth, follow the Twitter feed and feel absolutely free to respond to customers. Huge risk. Depends enormous amount of trust, enormous amount of confidence in your staff, which, by the way, speaking as a manager, I've discovered that placing trust and confidence in your staff rewards you many times over in comparison to the times that it hurts you. Although the times that it hurts you can be fairly entertaining. And the last one of these on a real micro level, the Baker tweet, there is a growing trend, particularly in Los Angeles and New York, where it won't surprise you to know that real estate prices are relatively high, despite the low value of what I now refer to as the North American peso, which we used to call the dollar. But what the Baker tweet's idea is, and it's just one particular application, is mobile food trucks creating high quality product, principally for office workers, who tweet their location to their followers. We're on the corner of 6th Avenue and 52nd Street between 12 and 1 today, and build their business from a moving truck and create a loyal customer base, even though they're in a different place at different hours of every day. And of course, mobility is going all the way from communication through to actual shopping, browsing on the device, buying on the device, and with Google Wallet and other applications, going straight through creating a seamless communication from media, the brand push, to the end transaction. So it's also transforming search, and I wasn't going to talk about search very much, but I kind of like that visual on the left, which I don't quite understand, but I like it anyway. And when you get your copy of it, please feel free to explain it to me. But one of the things that's really made us sit up is mobile search and the performance we're getting from mobile search. Consumers learn really quickly. They want to know, this is what I'm interested in, what price can I get it, and where can I get it that's right by me. And mobile search, in terms of its conversions, is producing terrific results. And of course, we now live in the world of Siri. It would be nice if Android gave its voice search a good name as well. Although I'm reliably informed, well, I say that, I'm unreliably informed that if you live anywhere east of India and south of Delhi, then the voice recognition on Android is better than the voice recognition on Siri. And the reason is it was developed in India by Indians with a number of Australian engineers involved. And so guess what? It recognizes the accents from this part of the world better than the upspeak of Cupertino, California. So that's worth thinking about. And for advertisers, thinking about how voice search is going to affect how they build their digital presences is a challenge that I don't think anybody's cracked. I'm sure at Adtech, being Adtech, there's been a lot of conversations already about data, but as we all know, as media and purchasing experience become more and more connected, we're more and more able to join the dots across channels and devices to deliver and measure a coherent brand story. And this is due to the proliferation of addressable media platforms, obviously the ones we've talked about, but also as IPTV develops. And in the US, there's a view that by the end of 2014, there'll be something like 35% penetration of internet-connected TVs in the country. If you aim off for that by economic value and say, what's the penetration amongst the 70% of the most economically valuable population, it will be quick. Now, for people in this room, they're going to think that's incredibly slow, 35% by the end of 2014. Because there's a big difference when you're changing your television, which you've had bolted onto a wall and had furniture built around and so forth. It's a slightly bigger deal to explain to the one you love and who's in charge of the decorating that that's what you're going to do. And so TV penetration, despite the cost coming down so fast, is a much slower cycle. It's a refrigerator cycle, but it's not iPad cycle either. But increasingly, we're using this data to work on microgeographies, which can be incredibly valuable in itself. We did some work recently with a pharmaceutical company around microgeographies, and we fused, so we have postcodes or zip codes here. Postcodes. So in America they have postcodes, but they call them zip codes. And they are 6-digit numbers, and then there's a hyphen. Everyone knows what their 6-digit postcode is, but many fewer people know what their zip +4 code is, because it goes 6 digits hyphen 4 digits. And by the time you get down to the 4 digits, you get down to very, very, very small geographies, a couple of streets. It's possible to fuse the National Prescription Database with zip codes and the addressable zones of television in certain parts of America. And we were able to prove to a client and to ourselves, just as importantly, that we could discover that something like 35% of all the prescriptions issued for a particular condition were issued in 2% of all the zip codes in the country, which meant that a brand that could never previously have advertised on television because of its volume, without that piece of information, but once it had that piece of information, it could do. And so there's an interesting aspect here, is that refining targeting doesn't just mean you go to more and more and more and more refined behaviors defined by various forms of data on the web and other digital areas. It also means that the other media and the other platforms become available to brands who previously couldn't access it. So we're moving into the kind of the last third. There's 4 big issues. I'm not expecting to surprise you enormously. I want to touch on 3 large players for a moment, and I shall be like Obama behind the bulletproof teleprompter at that moment, and talk about 5 kind of practical steps that we should all talk about. So there's a confluence of interesting events in our world. There's the social world, we know about that. There's data, we know about that. We know that content's become unhinged for its original destination, so content's everywhere, and we know that sooner or later everything is digital. And right in the middle of it, we have this thing called media. And if you work in a company whose business is the allocation, optimization, and attribution of advertiser dollars to create relevant and valuable events. This confluence of events is thrilling, it's revolutionary, and creates an opportunity for all the people that work in Group M, and sadly all the people that work for our competitors for the moment before they see the light and come and work for Group M. They're all welcome, especially people from Razorfish. I'm a big admiration for Razorfish. So the social thing is interesting. 1.5 billion, maybe 2 billion users. We all know about Facebook, we all know about LinkedIn. In this part of the world, you all know about QQ and RenRen. Because if you ever want to have a really good laugh, go into a meeting in China and describe RenRen as China's Facebook and see how long it takes for you to get stoned to death whilst you're there. That's kind of fun. But there's Mixi in Japan, which I used to call out as a really big example. But Facebook will overtake Mixi in Japan during 2012, which is something that would have been unimaginable in 2010, but it's going to happen. Then Google Plus and Pinterest, and I put them together simply because someone uttering the immortal words the other day, Google Plus, men are from Google Plus and women are from Pinterest, which I quite enjoy. But Google Plus, I think, is interesting. Pinterest, I think, is in and of itself interesting, but fascinating in terms of the idea of the interest graph as compared to the social graph. But what this all gives is empowered consumers, amplified opinion, content by discovery, not just by delivery. And in our business, and for every brand owner, the value of listening has become as valuable as the value of talking. The need to separate the signal from the noise and determine what things are real underlying trends, because let's face it, it's like a good game of ice hockey. You try and skate to where the puck's going, rather than where the puck is or where it's already been. And also a big challenge for advertisers and agencies to embrace the idea of liquid content. How do you create content that can appear, be found, be delivered in every channel, and do it with a sense of freedom and at a cost that makes economic sense? In data, we have big data everywhere. We've always had big data, but the big difference now for marketers is that we can capture the data and we can action it. And I'm going to touch on this a little bit later, and it's really important because the visibility of brands and businesses in the online world is truly affected algorithmically now, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the data gives us new sources of insight, new sources of where the next 10% of our revenue is going to come from, new mechanisms to value inventory. And I'm not going to talk about DSPs, I'm sure many people do that. And of course, data helps us measure and react in real time. So anyone that's collecting in data, take it out of the shoebox, put it in a warehouse, preferably a digital one, find forms in which you can gather it that are common to one another, because having loads of data is great, having no data harmonization renders great useless. Look at who you are prepared to share your data with. What's the value exchange when you share data, either between the advertiser and the agency, an advertiser and a technology partner, an advertiser and a media vendor, or even an advertiser and another advertiser? And the last of those, which you would think is uncommon, is much more common than you would think. And there are data co-ops of all kinds where people are realizing that the aggregated value of customer data, and what you put in, you can also get out, is more valuable than keeping the data to yourself. You might rightly be suspicious sometimes of giving all of your data to a media vendor, not unconnected with the fact that their motivations are sometimes different from yours. And actually, the art of buying and selling media has always been based on an information arbitrage, where the buyer has some information about the value of a piece of inventory that a seller might not have. Digital is everywhere. I call your attention to the visual on the top right of this, those of you that haven't seen it. But we're now in a world where we have more than 2 billion broadband users. We had 4 billion mobile users when I wrote the chart. It's probably 5 billion mobile users now. And we have still a very interesting notion of people consuming lots and lots and lots of what we thought was old media, the New York Times and Lost, but consuming it on new devices. So the touch points explode, and I don't know if any of you saw the Ipsos research that came out the other day, but they had a view of this. But as touch points explode, you have an implosion of simultaneous reach. And for most marketers, simultaneous reach was the biggest single driver. So the reaggregation of reach becomes important. But just as important becomes moving away from the mentality of campaign-driven marketing to an adaptive, always-on form of marketing. And recognizing that marketing channels are actually merging with channels to market and customer service channels. You're doing all of these things in the same place. So in order to live in this world, you have to be a big asset creator. And you have to create assets to watch, because we've always done that. But you also need to create assets that people can use and they can share. And you need to do them across device, across time, and on place. You have to make sure they're delivered, and you have to enable their discovery. Lastly, there's content anywhere. I mean, that's lastly of these four, not lastly in the keynote. That'll go on. We don't sound like that. We now live in a world of unlimited inventory supply. That's never happened before. Kind of pretty interesting. We also have unlimited suppliers. In 2010, Group M in North America bought digital inventory from 3,800 different distinct vendors. If you then go below that and add all of the individual networks that contributed inventory into exchanges, I don't know what the number would have been. And in that world, it's getting quite difficult to define what premium is and to make the decision about following the content, which we always did in a premium world, rather than following the audience, which we always did in everything else. And it's my view, and certainly the view of my colleagues in Group M, that we will spend a lot of our clients' money on doing really deep, really rich integrations with people built around content that is broad reach, highly valued, and has a high degree of social activity around it. The next thing we'd like to do is buy specific audiences that we can find out through their behavior of value to us, but we'd like to buy them in premium quality environments. And the question for advertisers in all of this is, can you create enough, and do you offer enough value to the curation process in order to make something worthwhile for the consumer? So we've always bought exposure guarantees. We're going to be buying data rights as well. We've always tried to find influence, but now what we need to do is find it and make it popular, rather than just find the program or the media property that's popular and hope that it has influence. So we really are moving into the closed stage. So there are many, many, many highly, highly significant companies that have changed the world, some of which didn't exist a decade ago, some of which have changed radically in that time. But I just wanted to touch on 3 of them, because a little while ago, it was quite easy to work out what each of these companies were. And if you said to someone, what does Google do? They say, oh, they run a search engine. What does Apple do? Oh, they make consumer electronics. What does Facebook do? It's a social network. And all of that's still true, but maybe it's not quite so clear now. So this is where you put your tongue in a cheek, and I don't want any kind of lawsuits coming out of this or anything else, but I thought I'd share this observation. So what Facebook says it wants and what they really want, in our view. So what Facebook says it wants, clearly been censored by Facebook. They are more powerful, but I thought, no. So Facebook's mission is to give people the power to share and make the world more open and connected. Well, that's true. Facebook's mission is also to become a social monopoly and monetize peer-to-peer recommendations through the sale of advertising and through a share of transactions and the development of social currency. So it's important to remember, if you're an advertiser, that they're in business. They're not just there to provide you a platform. What about Apple? Apple designs the best computers in the world, it leads the digital music revolution, it's reinvented the mobile phone, and is defining the future of mobile media and computing. It also wants to achieve a massive market share of desirable and interconnected premium devices and a large financial share, not just from the sales of wonderful hardware, but also as a gatekeeper of the distribution of the world's premium content. And that's kind of worth remembering too. So clearly Google isn't evil, we know that. Just a quick question, I'm sure many of you have. Who have read the original thesis written by Larry and Sergey at Stanford that gave birth to Google? Anyone? Someone like to shout if it's a yes? Yes, you sir, thank you. You will therefore remember one particular line from the thesis that Larry and Sergey wrote that said, "The project we are describing will be fundamentally undermined by any commercialization." Well, it just goes to show that people can get over even quite strongly held beliefs, and there's something about a tricked out 737 that will do that to a person. So Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Well, it's also to collect data from every digital touchpoint and every screen to optimize the price and value of connecting consumers to transactions. So I know that you all know this, but I think it's important that we recognize as the agency community and the advertiser community that these companies clearly have a commercial agenda, and that they, whilst they're great partners and provide us with fantastic innovation, great thinking and great products, they are still subject to allocation. How much of my budget should I put with them? Optimization, how do I get the most value? And real attribution, what did they contribute and their platform contribute to my ROI? And let's try and move beyond that last click as the definition of that value. At the heart of winning the discovery revolution, which is becoming more and more important, is an algorithmic struggle. Everyone in this room will know what the Facebook PageRank algorithm is. They might not be able to define it perfectly, but they'll know that beating the PageRank algorithm is the key to success in the organic listings of Google. Many of you will know, although I suspect not all of you, but I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, will also know what the Facebook EdgeRank algorithm is. And for those of you who don't, the Facebook EdgeRank algorithm determines via a combination of your interactions with things, brands, and other people, the frequency, the nature of those interactions, and the recency of those interactions, which posts from other people's Facebook accounts find their way into your newsfeed. And you will probably know that if you friended someone on Facebook in the early days, 4 years ago, and you never read one of their posts since, you never sent them a direct message, they didn't post on your wall, you didn't post on theirs, that somehow remarkably they've fallen off the face of the earth and you've not seen them in your newsfeed at all in the last period of time. Facebook in New York on the 29th of February, I'm hoping they're going to make another announcement on the next 29th of February. It'll certainly be worth the wait if they don't make one between now and then. You do have the 29th of February in Australia, right? That's a kind of global thing, so I'm confused. But Facebook announced that, in broad strokes, 16% of the posts made by brands to their own Facebook pages made it into the news feeds of their fans. That will be an average. Some will be higher, some will be lower, and I think that you will find that those who have the most engaged fans, like Nike and some of the big retailers like Walmart and others, are probably seeing a number that's higher than that. I suspect that the number of packaged goods advertisers are seeing a number that's lower than that. And so Facebook concluded the way that you resolve this dilemma was to launch a new advertising product. So you bought advertising to buy your fan base to start with. You've then bought your fan base and realized that organically only so much of your content gets there. So now you buy an ad product from Facebook in order to guarantee the distribution of that content or some of it to the rest of the fan base. Now, I think this is a great idea for Facebook. It's a great idea for some advertisers, but Facebook have now put themselves in a place where we have to think about allocation, optimization, and attribution. We have to determine, and it may be the case, and I sit on the Facebook Client Council, I'm a huge fan of theirs, I'm unbelievably grateful for the access they give to our clients. I know they're having a small team in Australia, and I've been told so many times they need not to have a small team, which means not no one but more people in Australia, but they put themselves in the same place as everyone else. And we have to conclude three things. What's the real value of a fan base? How many do you need? Do you need 10 million fans, or do you need 300,000 advocates? It's a good question. What's the most efficient way of building a fan base? Is the most efficient way by buying ads in Facebook Marketplace? Or is it by widely distributing like buttons and other things around the rest of your digital properties if you own a substantial owned media platform like the department stores in Australia don't? If you then want to activate your friends and get value out of the friendships, is the best way of activating them by buying story ads on Facebook? Or is it by buying ads elsewhere to tell people to come see you on Facebook? Or by some other mechanism, like creating truly compelling content that people want to use and want to share and drive advocacy rather than just friendships. And this is a puzzle that we need to solve. It's going to be different for every one of our customers. We need to solve this one at a time, but we have to think about it the same way all of the time. So what should we be aiming for? We need to work as clients and agencies, brand owners, our media partners, our technology partners, to create a completely connected brand and retail experience, whether or not you actually retail your own goods. If you don't retail your own goods, work with the department store and suggest they get a website. We need to do this with digitized communications and commerce capabilities, and that's e-commerce, it's m-commerce, it's f-commerce, and it's t-commerce. It's across every single platform, across all the platforms, and in store. And the people in this room, I assume and I hope, because I've spoken at Adtech events before, you are the innovators, you're the leaders, you're the visionaries, you're the ones that have to push the boundaries of what's possible. But you also need to do it by recognizing just how powerful old world relationships between retailers and their customers, brands and their customers, television programs and their viewers, magazines and their readers, newspapers and their readers, remain in consumers' lives. If we ignore that, we are not doing service to the people that are paying the bills to us, whether it's our clients or their shareholders. So step one, we need immersive communications. We need to work more closely with publishers and old media and new than those that are leading their industry, particularly those that have really lent into how do we distribute our content really effectively in mobile and tablet devices. We need, if we're the creators of media, to make every asset that we build socially enabled, and to prioritize, if you're a buyer and building partnerships, media programs that have a high social value. It's possible that the 10th most rated program is the second most talked about. There is a value in social arbitrage by attaching yourself to that conversation. And we need brands, where it's relevant, to be present in the conversation as well as the program. Step 3, don't ignore the data. Audience buying is going to continue. It's going to continue on the web. It's going to continue on social platforms. And it's going to start and then continue rapidly on television and mobile. Fourthly, and I borrow this from Google, maximize the presence in the zero moment of truth. And the zero moment of truth is that place before consideration starts and you first start piecing together a picture of a decision you're trying to make. If you do not have content optimized for the platform that people are using, so if you don't have a mobile website and you only have a regular website, you are going to lose out at the zero moment of truth. And you have to be at the zero moment of truth in order to capture your share of intent, both locally and indeed anywhere else in the world. And finally, we need to think about telling stories in the broadest sense, not just in the sense of story ads on Facebook, not just in sequential pieces of copy online or a series of TV ads throughout a campaign, but we need to facilitate incredible consumer connections, to create great partnerships, to utilize the digital infrastructure that I've talked about today. Never before, and no doubt in 3 years' time I'm going to get to this point in the presentation and say, never before has the need to balance the art and science of marketing more pronounced than it is today. The infrastructure is crucial, but what we build on top of that infrastructure and how we make it work seamlessly together. And there are many of us in this room that work for different agencies that share clients, and our clients are pulling their hair out at our lack of willingness to play nicely in the sand here. Sometimes they're not great integrators. Some of the technology companies we work with get frustrated with us, and we get frustrated with them. But if we're going to build great brands, build great sales, great margins for those brands, the need to collaborate in order to execute in this world is what will set us apart and what our clients will remember and what consumers will remember. So finally, in the future, great marketing communications are going to be built on the digital infrastructure. You'll see every component in every great piece of marketing. And they'll be layered with incredible brand stories that some people will engage with superficially, some people engage with great depth, some people that they will contribute to, and some that will become passionate advocates for our brand and drive the next generation of marketing. I thank you kindly for your attention. Thank you.
Maybe one question, and there's microphones there, so if anyone's got a question. I'll just ask it while somebody maybe comes down. Do you think, in general, clients are getting the media mix right? I'm spending enough on digital.
Yes.
Yeah,
I do, actually, because I think there's a question of, it depends on which category you look at. I think the automotive category has really lent in. I think all of those people that can complete transactions and distribution online are spending enough. I think packaged goods advertisers are, people say, are they spending enough? Well, that depends on whether you're looking at the volume of the money or the percentage of the total. And the fact of the matter is, for many of them, the volume of the money is definitely enough. It may remain a small percentage of the total. I think it's an almost dead debate. That's my humble opinion.
There's one question down there.
I guess one of the tensions that all of this creates is the dilemma between creating your own content to drive engagement and buying into content that's already engaging to try and, siphon off some of that engagement there and bring it to your own creative. How do you see that whole play happening between agencies and content, traditional content publishers that you work with?
Well, obviously I'm going to say it's a bit of both, and the best thing is collaboration. What I would like to do, because I keep banging on about the notion of reach and engagement at scale. We like to buy reach and get engagement from it. We love engagement, but we desperately need to scale it to make it valuable. So my view is that collaborating with people that are already building a fabulously popular platform that has wide reach, and then creating customizable assets that you can build of that, is a way that seems to me to be closer to being a dead certain money in the bank than starting with a blank sheet of paper and hoping that distribution of your content is going to be effective. Brand owners inherently aren't great programmers and publishers, and they really would do better most often to live off the juice that somebody else is creating. I think one of the interesting negotiations that's going to take place around this is that we may well work with a brand owner and a content creator at the same time, and do 3 deals simultaneously. One is, how much am I paying to put my ad in your content for exposure? And I might add some action value to that too. The second is, how much am I paying you to co-create an asset that is custom to my brand's needs? And number 3, which is the really interesting one, is how much am I paying you, if I'm paying you at all, to take that co-created asset and redistribute that asset on platforms that you don't own. And I think that's going to be a very interesting conversation, but one that will be had more and more often.
I think we're going to break up there. I think Rob will stick around for any other questions after.
No, I like hell, actually.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Rob. It's been a pleasure.